Some 17 shipyards once took up the banks of Washington, North Carolina. Mariners from all over ventured here to trade and work. It was also the place where many slaves took a step toward freedom. Washington native Lisa Peyton Jones grew up listening to stories about the Underground Railroad on her grandmother's front porch. Stories that she has researched, corroborated, and is now telling in Washington.
What made Washington so significant to those freedom escapes was, again, Washington was a huge town for commerce. You had a lot of enslaved people working on the waterfront. You had a lot of people who were able to pass on messages secretly about how you could get to your freedom. And they often did that through the help of abolitionists who came from all walks of life. They were white, they were black, Native American.
A block from the river, the Elmwood was once Beaufort County's largest plantation. It unwittingly hosted abolitionists who posed as tradesmen, midwives, and even preachers. Enslaved cook Fanny Grist worked in the house daily, including when Union soldiers stayed there during the Civil War.
She was referred to as a hearer, and her role was simply to be picking up information about troop movements. Often the 44 Massachusetts would help an enslaved person to get to their freedom. And so what she would do was she'd pick up these stories, she'd hear articles in the newspaper being discussed, and she'd be able to pass on some of that information to other freedom seekers who chose to or wanted to leave Elmwood Plantation.
Inside Washington's waterfront Underground Railroad Museum, you'll learn that those messages were told in codes.
As a young girl growing up here in Washington, I heard my grandmother and their friends talk about how flowers, a song, a nursery rhyme, how even clothing could be used to convey information to a freedom seeker. And again, you would need that information to successfully get off the plantation and to successfully be able to get on a ship.
Once on a ship in the Pamlico with a good tailwind, it was unlikely that a freedom seeker would be caught.
And so the river itself became an avenue of freedom, and it became a well-known avenue of freedom. And so many freedom seekers, their choice was to try to get to the Washington waterfront so that they could board some of the many ships that were either going to ports in the north, the Saltwater Underground Railroad, and because those ships traded with merchants overseas, one of the things you could do was try to get on a ship to get your freedom literally anywhere.
Visit the original Washington and walk the waterfront. Explore the museum exhibits. See the faces of freedom seekers. Hear how sunflowers, black-eyed peas, and songs held vital messages about escape. Imagine what it meant to launch from the docks and leave a bonded life behind. Washington's history of the Underground Railroad is here for you to discover. It's a history worth knowing and retelling. Visit WashingtonNC.com.